Well, welcome to the 700 Club. Lost business and even death threats. That's what a Colorado website designer has endured so far in her fight for free speech. Today, the Supreme Court hears her case, and the outcome could make an impact on Christian businesses nationwide.
Well, Lori Smith is challenging a Colorado anti-discrimination law. She's claiming that it forces her to violate her faith. Heather Sells reports on this pivotal case.
Lori Smith says her religious beliefs do not allow her to create websites for same-sex weddings. Colorado says that is discrimination. The Supreme Court will now decide.
I've always wanted to create custom artwork for weddings ever since I was a little girl.
Smith left the corporate world to pursue her passion for creating designs for specific causes. Given her biblical beliefs, she hesitated to include weddings after seeing how the state penalized Jack Phillips for refusing to bake a wedding cake for a same-sex couple.
I was cautious about continuing forward because I saw the way that the state of Colorado was treating other people of faith.
In 2018, Phillips defended his religious views at the High Court and won. The justices, however, ruled narrowly, saying hostile statements made by state officials toward him violated his free exercise of religion. Smith's case centers on the larger free speech question and the constitutionality of Colorado's anti-discrimination law. The state maintains wedding vendors must serve all ceremonies. Smith argues that violates her free speech.
It's a really intrusive and a really dangerous thing to tell an artist, you have to create something, you have to speak.
Religious freedom expert Lori Wyndham says this case is very important because protecting religious and political speech is the driving force behind the First Amendment. Colorado's stance, however, is that equal access in the marketplace is what's at stake.
Lori Smith is fully free to choose what websites, services she provides to whom, as long as she does not make the choice to open a business to serve the public. Once she makes that choice, then and only then, she is subject to Colorado's law and has to serve everybody equally.
Smith's legal team disputes that.
Colorado agrees that she serves everyone regardless of sexual orientation, and she simply seeks to choose messages that are consistent with her beliefs.
And her counsel says a win for Smith would be a victory for all beliefs and viewpoints.
This belongs to the LGBT graphic designer who doesn't want to be forced by the government to criticize same-sex marriage.
After 6 years of pursuing this case, Smith has endured severe backlash, including lost business and even death threats. Another reason religious freedom experts say this case matters.
I think a win from the Supreme Court here sends a really strong message that even if somebody's religious beliefs are unpopular, that doesn't mean you get to silence them.
In an era where hostility to people of faith is more common, this case could set clear markers about what is and is not allowed in the marketplace. Heather Sells, CBN News.
Well, the Supreme Court has narrowed what they're going to consider. They're only going to consider the free speech aspects of this case. They're not going to take this on freedom of religion, free exercise of religion. They're just not doing it. They're doing it solely on, is this a limitation on free speech? And in that, they'll probably create a landmark case. But we'll see this nationwide. What's happening in Colorado, there's a commission that's tasked. This wasn't someone who went to her for website services. It's because she posted on her website, I'm only going to do opposite sex websites. I want to celebrate marriage. I want to celebrate traditional biblical marriage. And the commission saw that and then brought this against her, saying, well, you can't do that. You can't open a business and then proclaim, I'm only going to do opposite sex couples. So this is a state action against a citizen based on what she put on a website, and they're saying this is discrimination. Now, this could be nationwide in just a few days if President Biden signs into law the repeal of the Defense of Marriage Act. And now there will be an equality under federal law for same-sex couples. Now what happens to every wedding planner, every wedding venue, every cake provider in the nation? What we've seen with Jack Phillips is about to be written across the nation. And again, more and more litigation. It's going to be a floodgate of litigation, and the Supreme Court needs to decide, do we still have freedom of conscience in the United States? Can you say, I only want to do biblical marriage, I don't want to participate in these other ceremonies? Do you have the freedom to do that? In other news, the FBI is investigating strikes on North Carolina's power grid. The attacks have left tens of thousands in the cold and dark. John Jessup has that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
That's right, Gordon. Schools in Moore County are closed, and as of this morning, more than 33,000 people are without power. It is the result of someone firing gunshots into equipment at 2 power substations Saturday night, and it could take days to repair the damage and restore power to all the customers. Authorities have declared a state of emergency, including a mandatory curfew from 9 at night to 5 in the morning. The sheriff would not confirm if it's a case of domestic terrorism.
I can't answer that. We're looking at all avenues. That's the reason I've got the professionals, the federal folks. They deal with the domestic terrorism more than locals. So they're on board and they're working with us to determine exactly who done this.
There were concerns that the attack was related to protests against a local drag show held Saturday night. Officials say there's no evidence connecting the two. Well, early voting is breaking records in Georgia's U.S. Senate runoff election. On the last day of the campaign, incumbent Democrat Senator Raphael Warnock and Republican challenger Herschel Walker are trying to drive more voters to the polls. On Friday, the last day of early voting, nearly 353,000 people cast their ballots. The total number who voted early, whether in person or absentee, is more than 1.8 million. Both of those numbers breaking records set in previous runoff elections. Democrats are hoping to widen their majority in the Senate, while a Republican win could weaken the Democratic agenda. However, Republicans will control the House in January, and they're vowing to investigate new revelations that Twitter colluded with the Democrats to suppress the Hunter Biden laptop story before the 2020 election. Meanwhile, both parties are condemning Donald Trump's call to set aside the Constitution so he can retake the Oval Office.
The so-called Twitter files released by new CEO Elon Musk show that just days before the 2020 presidential election, the Biden campaign demanded that Twitter scrub information critical of Joe Biden and his son Hunter from the site. And it did. When the New York Post tweeted out its story about the contents of Hunter Biden's laptop, Twitter removed links and blocked those who tried to share it. It also locked the account of then White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany for tweeting about the story. The laptop, abandoned at a Delaware computer shop, contained emails allegedly showing influence peddling by then Vice President Joe Biden and possible crimes by Hunter. The New York Post reports that the FBI was also involved, warning Twitter to expect so-called hack and leak operations by state actors involving the Hunter Biden story in the weeks before the election. The ranking member of the House Oversight Committee, Representative James Comer, vows to hold Twitter employees and the Democrats accountable for censoring the story.
The problem the Democrats should have is, why were they so scared of the laptop story? And the answer is because the laptop proves evidence that not only did Joe Biden lie to the American people about his involvement with his family's influence peddling and shady business dealings, it also proves that Joe Biden was a part of those shady business deals. And that's something every American should be concerned about.
The Twitter revelations led former President Donald Trump to demand a new election or be declared the rightful winner, even if it's not allowed in the Constitution. Trump said, "A massive fraud of this type and magnitude allows for the termination of all rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the Constitution. Our great founders did not want and would not condone false and fraudulent elections." The White House said Trump should be universally condemned for the statement, and some Republicans distanced themselves from Trump.
This is atrocious, having anyone that would make statements like that.
Well, obviously, I don't support that. The Constitution is set for a reason, to protect the rights of every American.
The Twitter files have rekindled charges that political censorship by big tech helped Joe Biden win the 2020 election and have fueled House Republicans' plans to investigate it. Dale Hurd, CBN News.
Thanks, Dale. Gordon, I get the sense that the next couple of years with Republican or divided control is going to be a bumpy ride.
Well, I think you're right. I think we're up in for a very, very interesting time with lots of investigations coming out of Congress, even more so than there have been over the past 6 years. It's absolutely incredible how Congress seems to be abusing their investigation power. Their power to investigate should always lead to legislation, and in the current ones, I'm not seeing that. It seems to be leading to more campaign fodder, and we're always into some kind of campaigning. Now, what's on Hunter Biden's laptop is a different matter, that if a sitting vice president, because that's what Joe Biden was when this happened in China and Ukraine, if a sitting vice president is somehow using their position to benefit a family member, well, then that is something that every American needs to know and every American needs to consider as you're casting your ballot. Do you want this guy to be in office again? So that's going to be a key issue come 2024. Now that it's out in the open, I can expect the Republicans to campaign very hard on it and really pursue investigations at Congress in order to do that. At the same time, this is no excuse to throw out the Constitution. We're all used to newspapers having political views. The New York Times actively campaigning, creating a story about bounties for soldiers in Afghanistan. And then after the election, it turns out, well, that story's not true. So Washington Post, New York Times, we're used to them campaigning. We're not used to big tech, and now we're finding Twitter actively involved in the Biden campaign. Facebook, we knew, actively involved to hundreds of millions of dollars being donated for get out the vote efforts. So as an electorate, the issue is, are you informed? Do you know that your information is being throttled? Do you know that your feeds are being manipulated? And if so, does that give you enough information to say, well, maybe there's another side? That's all part of a free democracy. That's all part of the give and take of politics. Politics seems to be now a blood sport as opposed to a contest with rules. So we're in for it, and we're in for it for the next 2 years. But I have to underline, none of this means you get to throw out the Constitution. And when the states certify their electors, well, then it's game over, and it's time to look to the next election.